I'll start because we have. So welcome one and all. Just a quick reminder on the format for those of you who've joined before and for the new ones here. Um, Basically, Unrehearsed Futures is a series of conversations that started right after the lockdown. This is our second season. The first season had about 20 talks. This season has about, we'll have about 30, 32 talks by the time we're done. And every week it's like a discussion. It's a circle. A group of people come. We invite a guest to come in and sort of stimulate the discussion in a particular way about something, a story that they have, an experience that they have. And all of it was originally to say, how do we teach in this great unrehearsed future? But as we went on, we realized the state of perpetual disruption and ongoing revolution and ongoing change is one where the future will always be unrehearsed. And so the topics and the conversation became, how can theater exist in this sort of space? And today's conversation, and this particular season's theme that Mgeni, my co-curator, Mwenya and Amy Russell came up with was about planetarity, plurality, and possibility. And it's not just because they all began with P, it actually meant something to us. And I was introduced to Mark Evans from Coventry by Amy. I had a chat with him about an idea that I have and about a future theatre initiative that could, which we're tentatively titling Banyan, like the tree, that is an overarching canopy, but the roots come down in different places. And Mark introduced me to a paper about reimagining theatre pedagogy, and it was a Brazilian pedagogical project for teaching. I'll tell you what the paper is called, for the teaching of arts in the 21st century, and it told the story of Sao Paulo Escola de Teatro, and my mind just went. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. I wanted to shut down my school and redesign it all from scratch and the ground up based on the principles of this school, because what was really amazing to me was the idea that a lot of what they spoke of were philosophies that we hold true in terms of how we teach, but yet we were practicing it within the classroom, between the faculty member and the students. But then we realized that they had adapted the whole structure of the school, not just what was happening inside the classroom space. So, and also what really excited me about the school was its relationship with its neighborhood and its relationship with society. And my quest personally is about how theater can not just be about the product, but how theater can really play a role in a much more direct role in the building of a good society. At scale, now that we have the digital medium at our disposal and we're now learning to play in it. I mean, I would have never been able to meet all of you until this had happened. So without further ado, I'll introduce Rodolfo. If Falguni, if you can put his bio in the chat window. He is the founder of Osataras Theatre Company, a theatre and film director, writer, and pedagogue. Having directed over 100 productions and performed in 30 countries, he has received many awards, both in Brazil and abroad. He's also been developing research in cyborg theater since 2009. How good. Rodolfo is also one of the founders of the largest drama school in Latin America, SP Escola de Teatro. He is a visiting lecturer and professor in many different institutions in Helsinki, Stockholm, Berlin, Birmingham, and others. And since the beginning of the pandemic, he has embraced it clearly by developing over 14 digital plays with artists from all continents. Rodolfo, welcome to Unrehearsed Futures. So we'll hear your opening remarks for about 10 or 15 minutes. I'll throw a few questions in. And then really, this is for all of us to learn more, understand more, and converse. It's a conversation for all of you. So as you note, as you think about stuff, do keep popping questions in the chat window using the feature. I would really like to get to conversation sooner than later for all of us. Wonderful. Welcome, Rodolfo.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jehan. It's wonderful to be here with you and to have people from different continents and speaking about our experiences. I think this is a space of also of sharing our concerns about the future and how we can think of pedagogy for the future. So I think it's a wonderful initiative, and thanks a lot, really. So I try to be very synthetic so that you can understand a little bit more about our project. I just start with one point, which is in order to shape the schools for the next century, we have to unlearn everything we learned about what a school is, so that we can have a new perspective for what a pedagogy for the future can be, you know? And so I'll tell you the story, how our school was organized, how it started, what are the principles, and then we can talk a little bit about it, okay? I will share my screen. It's a PowerPoint. I hope you don't have too much prejudice against PowerPoints, but it can help me, you know, like, okay. So this is a project, SP Escola de Teatro is a project financed by the government of the state of São Paulo. We have an NGO, Associação dos Artistas Amigos da Praça, which means Association of the Friends, Artists of the Square, because the school is situated in a square, which is like an off-Broadway movement in São Paulo, okay? So this is the facade of our very small theater venue. Okay, we arrived there in the year 2000. It was an area, very complicated area in this downtown São Paulo, lots of criminality, and we had a very small venue, like very, very small, really. What happened is that after some years, other theater companies started arriving in the square after 2-3 years, and bars and other theater groups started working around this area. The square was like this in the time we arrived at Roosevelt Square. It was very strange. It was very decadent. And it was basically an area for prostitution of transvestites and transsexuals, and also for drug trafficking. So a very, very dangerous area. It was considered to be one of the most dangerous areas in São Paulo. And then at the same time, meanwhile, we were also working on the suburbs of São Paulo in a very poor area called Jardim Pantanal. And this area, young boys and girls, they didn't have an opportunity to learn any profession or have any technical skills. So we started teaching them sound operator and light operator, and some of them worked in our venue. So we started developing this connection to this very poor suburb of São Paulo. So what happened is that in 2005, the mayor of São Paulo, José Serra, he came to our venue, and he got to know the projects we had with youngsters from the poor suburbs. And we spoke about the possibility of an educational project with social inclusion perspective. So we organized like a group of artists who were working in this area, and we started thinking of a dream school, the school we wanted to share with society. So this was the basis for our beginning, you know. And during 2 years, this 12 people group met regularly to plan the school and to think this was our question. what was the school of our dreams, in which school we would like to study, you know. And then, so these are the artists. They are the founders of the NGO. So all the decisions and all the projects are shared by all these artists. And what is very important is that each of them comes from a different field. So set design and costume design, it's Serroni, a very well-known set designer and costume designer. Marici Salomão, a very famous playwright and a teacher, and Raul Barreto and Hugo, who are actors and clowns, from Raul Teixeira from sound, Guilherme Bonfante from light design. So we learned from the beginning that all the areas must be respected and all the artists involved in any project must be respected. And this made a huge difference in our project because we learned everyone is important in the creative process of performance, and the collaborative sense of the production became very strong for us. So during the second term of 2009, the project became real, and we defined our pedagogical structure. We had many candidates. We had only 200 vacancies at the time, 25 per area. So we have 8 areas and 25 students per area. So like directing had 25 students, acting 25, and so on. And the courses started in February 2009. So this is one of our bases. Yes, this school is a traditional old school in a very deteriorated area in Brás district in São Paulo. So the principles we had were based on democratization of theater and accessibility, and we kept them. So many of our collaborators in the school come from vulnerable groups. For example, all our receptionists are transvestites or transsexuals who were in prostitution, most of them. So they were ex-prostitutes who work at our school as receptionists. And some of them left the reception desk and went into pedagogical department or library. So they studied and we helped them to study, to go to university and learn. So we have I believe we have around 60 in the basic structure of the school, 60 collaborators, and 10 of them are transsexuals, more or less. Well, we have a program called KAIDOS, and the basic idea of this project is to give opportunity for people in vulnerable, artists in vulnerable situations. So they get money to study. So in order to pay their, for example, their tickets for their bus tickets, their transportation, or to eat a sandwich during the school, or to buy books. So we give them support, financial support every month. You know, this is very important if you want to make your school a democratic space and an accessible space. Otherwise, you live in a bubble of middle class. So the idea is that theater should go all the classes, social classes, you know, and connect to all of it. So this project makes our school very diverse. So we have students who were, for example, in their, they had a master in, I don't know, New York University, and some of them come from slums, and they work together. And this is important for us, that different social classes meet and work together, you know. So the pedagogical department, we have 400 students. The extension department, we have 800 students who are professionals and beginners who want to learn some specific workshops and so on. 200 students, now a little bit less, are supported by this financial aid from KAIDOS project. We have the communication department, and we have SP Escola de Teatro, which is partner school, a sister in the area, in the central area of Brazil. We developed our project over there as well. The artistic direction is from Ivan Cabral, who is one of the founders, and he is also from Osatiros Theater Company, and he's the heart of all this project. So we have our pedagogical director is Joaquim Gama, and we have the 8 departments. So playwright, lighting design, sound design, mime or humor, acting, set and costume design, stage techniques, and directing. And I am responsible for the directing department. I am one of the 8. All the 8 areas are coordinated by one of the founders of the school. So we keep the same spirit as we started the project. Yeah. The idea, the basic pedagogical principles are a school for everyone, artists who nurture artists. So the idea is that artists teach artists, non-hierarchic, non-accumulative, and modular system. And I'll explain in a few moments what this is. Okay, so the basic thinkers we used are Milton Santos. He's a Black Brazilian geographer who developed the concept of territory, like the social space. So the connection between the theater school and society and the space in which it is situated. The space is not only the geographical space, but the society in which it lives. So all our connections, our themes, the work is developed based on territory and space. Paulo Freire, I don't know if you heard of him, it's a very famous Brazilian pedagogue. He developed the idea of the pedagogy of the oppressed, or the pedagogy of the autonomy as well, in which he says that educators and educants, they live experiences together, and both of them learn during this process. It's not only one who has the knowledge, who transmits the knowledge, but the together experience that makes possible the learning process. Yeah, and Fritoy Capra with the idea of the systemic cognitive process. This is very important for us to make it clear that the school is united, because we have 8 different departments, and if we don't have a connection among all the departments, it can be very very difficult to connect them and to make them speak the same language. It would be like 8 different churches. So we have to have this system to make all the departments connect. So the principles, yes, theater practice is the ground for education. So we have to educate. You have to learn how to do in order to learn how to be. an artist. And the theater doing is the basis for knowledge. So it doesn't work if you only speak about theater. You have to practice theater. So what's a module? A module is a unity of 4-month education with the goal of investigating, thinking over, and proposing a dialogue among all the courses about stage production. All the regular courses follow theme, operator, material, and pedagogue artist, so that the school breathes a common creative ground. So how it works, I will show you now. For example, a module is like a project to be developed, and the students learn during this project. And what are the bases for the project or for the module? So it's a theme, no, not a theme, it's the axis, yes? Narrativity or autonomy. The operator, for example, capitalism in Brazil, or material, the life of a specific person. And the pedagogue artist is someone who has already worked with these topics. So he is a reference for our development. So I come here, for example, we have colors. We don't have years, like first year, second year, third year. No, we have colors, and the students have to study the 4 colors, and they can combine the colors. They don't need to do the colors in a specific order, because we don't believe in hierarchy in knowledge. We believe in experience lived. So, for example, the green will always be about dialogue and character. For example, one operator is the thinker of a theme. So, childism, which is the prejudice against children. This is one operator. The material interviews with children, for example, and they speak about the prejudice they suffer. And the pedagogue artist, for example, in this specific module was Philip Ridley, who wrote about children and children abuse. So based on this theme, operator, material, and pedagogue artist, all the 400 students are going to develop projects in their specific areas with the other students. So then we have this process, experiment, and evaluation. So how it works. In the process, the students are in their own department. So the students are, for example, in direction, or in acting, or in sound design. And they learn the techniques of their specific field, okay? So the process are, for example, 3 weeks, or 9 classes, or 10, 12 classes, that they are only in their course learning specific things. Then they go to experiment. When they go to experiment, they leave their specific field, and they go like in a theater group with other fields. So they live like an experience in a theater group, and they try what they learned. So I am a sound designer. Okay, I learned some programs, some computer programs for making sound. Then I learned this in the process. When I go to experiment, I leave my department and I go into a theater group. In this theater group, I will work on the things I learned. So I'm going to prepare a soundtrack for this theater group with some with the computer program I learned, for example. And then we have an evaluation, which is very important. Okay, so this is, we repeat this 3 times. So they make the evaluation, they say, oh, we have problems here, we have to learn something else. They go again to process, they go again to the classroom, they learn more skills, and then they go back to the theater group in experiment, and they try it again, and then they evaluate again, and then they go back to process, they learn more stuff, then they go to experiment, and then evaluation. So it's like a round circle. So what's a cell? A cell is the experiment, how it is structured. You have 2 directing students, 3 stage technique students, 3 sound design students, 6 acting or mime students, 3 scenography and costume design students, 3 light design students, and 3 playwright students, or 2. And they make a theater group. So during the experiment, they are together developing their own work, absolutely autonomous. There is no interference. No teacher goes in and says, you should do that, you should do that. No, they work the way they want. So this is the basic idea of Paulo Freire, that you have autonomy to learn. And then the experiments, the cells show for the rest of the school the result of their research. So all the students see each other's work. As they have the same theme, operator, material, and artist pedagogue, they have the same references. So they can easily relate to what is being done by each group. And they can see, oh, that group developed this project in a very different way from my group, which developed in a different way from the other group. So they learn also from seeing each other. We believe a lot that the learning process not only happens from the teacher to the student, but among the students. The students also teach each other, okay? So, and the evaluation also is completely different from the traditional schools. So the student is evaluated by his cell, by his theater group. The educator from the cell, but he also evaluates the educator from the cell or the other members of his cell. And also the teacher of his regular course also evaluates him, and he evaluates the teacher. So it's a back and forth process of evaluation, so that we learn also to correct our mistakes as an institution, and they also can share their opinions about themselves as well, which is very important. So the evaluation process is very complex. It's not the traditional way. So we have a new school now. This is the building in Roosevelt Square, which was before the school started there. It was an abandoned building. And that's it. I mean, just to start with, you know, like, that's it.
Rodolfo, just one more thing that from the structure, just can you tell us a little bit more about how it's non-sequential, like a student can join at any quarter, and
yes,
just explain it, because it's not like in my school where you have to join with a particular group and move together with that group through the journey, right?
Yeah, no, it's very different because we don't have, we don't believe in a hierarchy, artistic hierarchy. So you don't have to learn the Greeks in order to learn Shakespeare. You don't have to learn Shakespeare in order to learn Beckett or something like that. We don't believe in this kind of artistic pedagogy. We believe that you learn by experience. So your experience with some theme is what matters. And then you go after Shakespeare or Greeks or the theories and so on. So it doesn't matter if you arrive in the green or in the blue or yellow or red, which are the 4 colors we use. Each color is a different experience. And this experience is the basis for the learning process. So the idea, and that's why it's decolonial in a sense, that we have to forget what we learn about teaching and understand that the teaching process is completely different in an informational society. We are not anymore in the Industrial Revolution times. We are in an informational society. So students have access to knowledge and information all at any moment with 2 clicks or 1 click in a button in YouTube or anything. They can learn information, they can have information, but they learn when they practice, and the practice is the goal. So our goal is to make them have experiences that make them autonomous to develop their own art. This is the basic idea. So what happens also is that, for example, I go to green. I have just arrived in SP Escola de Teatro. I go to green module, okay, which is character and dialogue and conflict, okay? So I am starting, but there are many of my colleagues who are already finishing the school in the green. So I'm going to learn also with my colleagues, not only from the teacher, but from the experience the others have. So we strongly believe that the learning process is not one direction, it's multi-directed. You know, you can learn from everyone. This is the basic idea.
Okay. So I've got a couple of startup questions, and then I really do hope anyone who's interested can take it further in the ways. Rodolfo, thank you so much for that. One is the story of, so there are a couple of questions. One is, let me start with this. You had the 8 people from the different aspects of theater around, all who seem to be around the process of the people involved in the creation of a theater product, of a theater production. And so it was the artist, the set designer, the writer, so it was all of those. However, and so that seems very somewhere, quote unquote, conventional in terms of what is theater. Theater is about making plays that go on stage or go on a performance of that orientation. But having said that, where is because I know it's there. I've seen it in the paper, and I've seen it in the way that it's worked with you. Where is that relationship between the act of theater and the society and the square, for example? Or that's number one. Number two is, are all of the students who are graduating, are all of the teachers teaching, are they all just about doing theater, or do they, like, remember I was thinking about the idea of, are theater makers, so my quest is, can a theater maker be a social engineer, somebody who helps communities hold space, somebody who helps communities find their way? And so how does what you have designed, which seems product oriented in one way, yet do all of this? Because I know it's doing that. So I just wanted to know how is that okay? Because it's not entirely clear in the presentation.
Okay, so first, I think I didn't speak about how the idea of these 8 areas connect and so on. So it is connected to the São Paulo theater movement. We have a very strong theater movement in São Paulo based on groups. And in these groups, sometimes the light designer is as important as the director, or the set designer is as important as an actor. So it's very connected to a Brazilian tradition, I think, which is started maybe in the 50s, 60s, and then came to the 90s to 2000s. So this is quite different from the European perspective, which is very director, dramaturg, or playwright centered, you know? So we work more in a community. And it also makes sense when you think, for example, in our theater groups, in our cells, in the experiment, sometimes there are huge discussions between a stage technique and a director, or an actor and sound designer, you know, about what the process should be like. So this is something that is part of this Brazilian identity, you know. So, but it's also an ethical question, because I believe that everyone in the, not only me, but everyone in our school believes that all the artists involved in a production, a theater production, have to be respected. So this is one side. The other side is how the school is connected to the environment. Yes. So what happened is that after this huge revolution, urbanistic revolution, for example, the government was forced to make renovation of the square. They spent hundreds and hundreds, thousands of dollars to renovate Roosevelt Square, because they saw that the urbanistic revolution happened only in the theaters, in the bars, but not in the square itself. So this impact is also very strong. And this is so crazy to imagine that theater can be so powerful to change the reality of the urbanistic landscape, you know? But not only that, I mean, we have lots of actions with the neighbors, with people who live around the school, with the trans community. For example, we have a program only for trans, where they meet weekly to discuss trans problems in Brazilian society. And this is one of the most important programs for trans activism in São Paulo. So this is all part of our discussion. Now, for example, we are discussing the gender neutral language, or how we can incorporate new terms to the language in the school and connect it to society according to demands of the trans community and feminist movement. So we are all the time connecting to society and learning with society. So we learn from society and we give back to society. This is the idea, the exchange, you know.
Good. Thank you so much for that. One of the things we had in our pre-chat was you had actually said, and I'm just going to share this section, if you don't mind. I'll just, from that article. Hold on, I'll get the right one. Share. Is this visible? Is this visible?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So this is, we'll share the, Rodolfo's kindly seen to it that we can all get an access to this article. But Rodolfo, this was what really blew my mind, and in terms of an approach. And I was just saying, you said that, you know, your perspective has shifted on some of this, or become further refined over the years, because this article was from maybe 8 years ago. So did you want to share like what has shifted in your perspective, especially around what you were talking about in terms of decolonization?
When we founded the school, we didn't think about decolonization, you know, like it was not a word or a concept that was in our daily discussions, you know. But in the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, it became very clear for us that the process we had was decolonizing our mind, you know? And what we understand by decolonizing is not only to forget the tradition of Eurocentric theater, but to 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 unlearn some things that are not supposed to be there. You know, sometimes we are like hostages of principles that are no longer real. You know, like society is not like that anymore, and we are still thinking with the heads of our grandparents. You know. And I think the decolonization process is also about gender, about social classes, about accessibility, about racism, and also about forgetting what we were or what the old generations were, you know. And I don't think that the decolonizing process should happen only to Brazilians or Indians. Yes, we have to search our own identities. South Africans are searching for their own identities in theater, but I think the Europeans also have to decolonize their own thinking in order to understand that we are living in another world, you know. And sometimes I have the feeling that Europeans are trapped in the past and they don't know how to deal with what's going on in society, you know. And so it's the same for us. We are trapped in our past, and we have to forget we were colonies, and we have our own identities, and we have to discover what kind of school is our dream school, you know, because we are teaching, and this is very important, we are teaching the future generations, not the past generations. So we cannot use patterns from the past. We have to use patterns for the future. And this makes it completely different, you know, because if you think that in 10 years or 15 years, Google is going to have holographic projection with very democratic access to everyone, and you are not thinking about how am I going to teach these theater people the possibility of holographic theater? How am I going to teach? What is the role of theater for the future? You know, how, what kind of perspectives can we bring to theater in this world in which we are living intensely the digital dimension? And sometimes we forget the, you know, so all these things are very important. But to think that we are teaching for the future generations to make them autonomous and confident to face the future, and not to arrest them in the past. So it's a completely different perspective, you know.
So I've got my last sort of key question for Rodolfo, but really anyone who has further questions, do put your hand up and do start to get involved in and with your responses, your reflections, and further chat, and we can just have it, because Rodolfo is equally interested in to hear your perspectives on things.
Yes, please.
That's the trade-off of coming to an Unrehearsed Teachers Talk, is he gives and we give back as a community. So do start thinking about that. So the pandemic hit us. We have all sort of started to play in the digital space as well, even as a functional tool to just continue doing what we were doing, or suddenly realizing there's more possibility. Do you, what have your thoughts been? And I know you're going back to normal school very soon, and that's going to be a whole other experience. But what have your thoughts been about the story of the school and the square, the story of your approach, the principles of the dream drama school? What do you think SP Escola de Teatros has to offer to future conceptions of schools that allow us to almost scale the idea to have recreate or be inspired by that methodology, but then suddenly it can appear in the work in Cape Town, it can appear in the work at the Drama School Mumbai, it can appear in the work at Ernst Busch. It can be, you know, I say that because I can see that Suzanne is from there, but it can appear at Edna Manley College in Jamaica, and so on and so forth. So what do you think that where have you felt like, oh, we are sitting on something that has real potential for the future? I mean, when I spoke about my ideas to Mark Evans, he said, you must go and meet them. So have you thought about the scope and the possibilities that have opened up now that you are in the digital dimension as well?
Yes, I mean, everything is in a turmoil right now. So we haven't had the opportunity to understand exactly how much impact we are going to have from this pandemic. Yeah, but I guess in our school, for example, we have because we are all the time connected to what's going on in society. This is basic for us. All our themes are connected to what's going on in society. We never discuss the past, but we discuss the reality, what's going on in society, you know? And what we notice is that the digitality will have a new dimension for our pedagogical system, you know? So, for example, we have the school in São Paulo and we have the school in Mato Grosso, okay? And they are like 2,000 miles or 3,000 kilometers away from each other. It's like, I don't know, Lisbon, Berlin, something like that. So it's inside Brazil, but it's very far. And in the old days, before the pandemic, we had to be all the time moving from one place to the other in order to teach or to have a conference of 2 hours or to have, which were important aspects of our pedagogical process, but they were not, it was financially very heavy, you know? So, for example, Suzanne is from Ernest Bush, and they invited our school to be part of the Alexandria Nova project, in which 7 universities of Northern Europe are together having lessons every Monday. And Brazilians can go as well, you know? Of course, it's very difficult, this English speaking question for Brazilians, because only upper class speaks English. But the possibility of sharing knowledge, you know, globally, in a globalized process, this is amazing, you know, and this is something that Alexandria Nova didn't think before the pandemic. They thought like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Oh, we have our computers, we have internet, so let's teach. And this has been an extremely powerful experience. And I hope, for example, we can have lessons with South Africa or with Australia or Jamaica, anywhere, you know, and we can share knowledge and we can be a global community. I think Ulrika is here, and she's a very good friend of mine. And in December 2020, we were speaking about how would it be powerful to make a community of artists from all over the world, you know? And it's crazy because we were thinking how we could connect artists from all over the world. And then the pandemic, which is a tragedy, made us see that the way was so clear and so obvious, and we didn't get it before, you know. So I am very optimistic about the potentiality of digitality for the future, the potential of digitality.
Wonderful. And I see some things starting into the chat window, but I'm just looking at this. It starts with Mungeni saying the iterative. Mungeni, do you have a response, or would you like to share what you've written in the chat window a bit, or elaborate on that?
I don't know. Anybody?
Mungeni's got a little bit of tech issues.
I'm frozen. Oh,
We
there we
can
go.
hear
Hi,
you.
hello, hello. No, I was just saying, I find it really interesting that the system is built on this kind of process of iteration, right? And it's in some ways it's not as fascinated by the idea of an end product, but the experimental paradigm itself is where the learning happens. It's in being able to, as William Kentridge often says, is in that walk from the camera he takes the picture to the piece of paper where he's making the inscription. It's that walk between the place where you record or you kind of encapsulate things and where you're producing, where the real thinking and kind of experimental kind of stuff happens. It's in that moving back and forward between the studio and the page, or between the idea and its manifestation. That I think is really interesting in terms of getting students to think outside of the obsession with product and an easily sellable product, right? Because that's ultimately what it comes down to, is how can this piece that we've created circulate? How can it circulate in ways that make us money? And often that means that we're losing sight of the actual learning paradigm that's at work there, right? Is in the doing of the work rather than the transmission of it, if that makes sense. Anyway, I just found that a really, really interesting way to kind of shift the locus of, not the locus, sorry, shift the focus of the pedagogy back to practices of doing, to practice, right?
To the experience, yeah? Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
interesting what you say. It's interesting what you say, because schools are like spaces for frustration, because you want to be perfect. You want to have 10, and it's schools are really afraid, and teachers are really afraid of mistakes. They are afraid of their mistakes, and they are afraid of the mistakes of their students. But the learning process can happen only through mistakes. Because when you make mistakes, you learn, oh, I did that and I shouldn't. And when you prevent the mistakes, when the teacher prevents the mistakes, the teacher is also putting the student in a safe space, which is fake, because they are not getting prepared to what life is. And what life is, it's full of mistakes, like you cannot avoid them. So the school doesn't prepare students to face their mistakes for the future. That's why autonomy is so important, because you prepare students for the future and for the mistakes they are going to make in the future as part of the artistic process, and not as something to be afraid of, And it's interesting because the students usually who arrive in our school, they come with this fear of mistakes, and it's very difficult to teach them that we are not evaluating them for the correct or perfect work, but for the learning process they lived. So the perspective is not the flawless work, but the process, the learning process they live. Sometimes it's flawless, but it's no learning process. You know how to do it.
Yeah, I see Jehan's talking about brave space instead of safe space, which I think is super rich. And I forget who else spoke about learning to embrace failure, right? And perhaps rethinking what failure means, because again, failure we tend to think of as an inability to do the thing one set out to do, rather than realizing that you may not get there, but something incredibly generative has happened on the way to the failed destination. Yeah, I really like this idea of bravery instead of safety.
I just,
Thank you.
I wanted to build on that, because not the brave space, safe spaces is just something we're doing over here. We started with intimacy. So we're just trying to understand what our awareness is around practicing, the performance of sexuality, etc. How can you do it safely, especially with students coming off digital isolated spaces and suddenly being in contact with each other. So we started to bring intimacy training into the school. And the intimacy training teacher taught us about this idea of brave space versus safe space, and they use it as a notion in intimacy choreography and intimacy work on set and studios. But when you got the students to move from the idea of getting right and wrong and product and moving to the experience and the value of the experience being an imperfect one, but therefore maximum learning, what happens to the, at the end of it, they graduate and they go into a capitalist paradigm, because that's all we have, where they have to show what value they can demonstrate from the time they spent at your school, or what value they can now have as theater makers or as creators. I had one more question about theater making, but I'll pop to this in a bit. So what is their notion of where their value lies? Has that changed? Are you able to make the case for process is where the value is versus product? And do they take that into their practice going forward, or do they end up getting subsumed by the industry?
Wow, this is a difficult question because it's very difficult to evaluate how they manage. I mean, but from what I see from the perspective from the students who finished school and what they say about their learning process, they say that they learned to be autonomous and to define their own way in the world, So many of them go immediately on work and getting in a kind of structure that is very similar to our school, like in collaborative theater, respect to the functions, and also those who are students in sound design or light design. They have a different approach when they go to professional life, because what's important to mention as well is that the school happened in a moment where the theater field in Brazil developed a lot. For example, in the beginning of the 1990s, we had, 50 venues, theater venues in São Paulo, and now we have 400. So we needed the school, and these students, especially, which is very difficult, but for students from who come from slums, many times they said, I don't want to be an actor or anything, but I need an opportunity, a job, and they have they have the chance to be included in the market as professionals, as light operators, sound operators, technicians, So there are hundreds of our students who are working professionally and had an opportunity in life to leave the vulnerability they were used to live, and have a respectable life because they had the opportunity of studying in our school, So there are different perspectives. There are people who are more artistic, but there are also the technicians who deserve respect and who have the possibility to be inside the market, and which is very important as well. I don't think only artists, but also the technicians and the poor, the vulnerable teenagers who get in our school,
Suzanne, thank you for your note. It's lovely to see you, and thank you
sorry.
for those. That's okay.
I have to go.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye, Suzanne.
Bye-bye. Like to see all of you someday.
Before you leave, just so, keep looking out for Unrehearsed Futures, because Sophia Steff is going to be talking to us in a few weeks about Speaking from a Dangerous Place is the title of the conversation, which was how do you practice decolonization from the global north?
Yes.
And it's just an interesting one.
I will look where can we see the recordings of the former ones somewhere?
Yes, they're all there, and Falguni is going to put them up. So
Okay.
just before I go to the next chat, I'll let you all know all the recordings are available on our website, and we're going to spend the next 15 minutes in a formal chat space, and then we'll close out in 15 minutes, after which it's the after party. The recording stops and everyone can just chit chat however long, and it's very unmoderated. So I'm going to go to the next point over here that was interesting. Sumit Roy, are you there? You talk about geography has become history, and you've also asked a question about learning by earning. Do you want to take that question directly?
Yeah, hi, Jan, thanks very much. Yeah, the fact that the Red Curtain has been able to work with Os Satyros and been able to put together production with 25 actors with over 5 continents, geography has become history. Rodolfo and I are now very good friends.
Yes, and we never met.
we never met. So yeah, so this whole thing about, you know, in the running of the drama schools, Jan, now you have access to faculty from across the world, which would probably be very difficult to do physically, right? What I'm keen on is, are the students taking to this digital experience, or do they want only physical work? That's one thought, which is actually to Jan and for everybody else, because I know that all of you are also running schools or doing education. And the other thought is learning by earning. Now, I find that a very interesting model, because I run a learn by earning brand building university, and now we're wanting to bring it into theater. I wonder whether any of you have tried learning by earning. The pedagogy is really simple. You do maybe a workshop, or you do a production where the students produce it themselves, and they're taught to be able to market it in a manner that they can pay themselves. Okay. Has anybody tried that out as yet?
So on the first point, on the phygital experience,
yeah,
we spent 20 weeks. We ran our 1-year course. We didn't declare a 0 year. We ran our 1-year course, but we did 20 weeks in completely digital. And then we put the students into a 13-week COVID bubble residency in a farm outside Bangalore.
Okay.
So we isolated them, we RT-PCR tested them, we got their vaccinations even administered at the farm, but they are there. But at the end of the 20 weeks, when they still hadn't had the experience of physical work, what we had managed to successfully embody in their experience, even though they were in their little Zoom windows, and what they ended up creatively collaborating and making was equally and completely different and exciting. Some of the work that they did was just really told me that they loved it. Having said that, when they got to the residential and now they're making together, it's really interesting, because first we thought that when we meet them, they'll already come with all of that embodied work in there. But we had to start from scratch, and then in the doing of it, wait for the stuff that they had experienced during the digital residency to the digital module to automatically sort of manifest itself. But if we tried to call upon something we had taught them, it wouldn't work. But if we just got on with the work, and then suddenly we found them coming up. And the way they collaborated creatively, Rodolfo and me were before this speaking about how this space is very good for the intellectual work and for the cerebral work of making and creating. So they know that process, but now they're doing it in embodied space over there.
Just to tell you, Jan,
but they much prefer being in person together, for sure.
No, that's certainly. But what we've discovered, and Rodolfo will bear us out, that we were able to pay the actors in the production. So obviously financing and paying the actors is now becoming possible. And many of the actors that Rodolfo cast were actually results of the Learn by Earning program that we ran. Okay, so like Nirmal Rodolfo is a result of a Learn by Earning program that had been run, and we'd be very happy to offer this to you, Jahan, and any other drama schools. It's a very simple model, 21 sessions where the teams produce their own plays, learn to market it, and learn to fund themselves, learn to pay themselves.
I think that we should really look at that very closely, because all our alumni want to know how to earn later on.
And just not just for India, we'd be very happy to do this because geography is history. Anybody in the world who wants to take this on will be very happy to pass on what we've already learned, because you can run it yourselves.
Great. Yes, absolutely. I like the idea of geography becoming history for sure. Rodolfo, any more thoughts on that?
AB, no, maybe AB has, I don't know, she has any question about that?
Well, there's a lot to talk. First of all, thank you very much, Rodolfo, for inviting me to be here. It's very inspiring. It's very good to know that your project, Jehan, and congratulations to you all. I think as much as we can, talk and discuss about the subjects globally and from different reference, because of course we have completely different reference, what happens in India, in Brazil, in UK, South Africa is different, but as looking for possibilities to just tangle from many strings, we've been tied into the way we educate, we think, we work. I think that's how we move forward to redefine how that could be for the future on this new normal. But it's fascinating moment in the world. I was maybe not exactly in that subject that was discussing, but I was thinking here, Rodolfo, in a question for you. Considering that in Brazil and many other countries, the children and the youngs, they don't have a good education, they have much contact with theater, arts. I'm wondering, how is the average of your students that come to study in the SP Escola de Teatro? And how is the induction, how is this process, the induction with the students to help them to decide what module they want to go to, how to we start, because it might be so different from everything they've been in the learning room, in the classroom, to suddenly go to a certain process that's so, equally freedom and make of choices they've been not used to. So if you could tell us a little bit about this process, would be so good.
Okay. So the students have to study 4 different colors, yes, which are modules. And we have green, yellow, blue, and red. And for example, in the first half of the year, the first semester, we teach green and blue. And the second half, yellow and red, okay? So we usually try to fit them in the most adequate color according to their theater background. So those who are more experienced, they can go to blue and red instead of green and yellow. But it's not a rule, It's very difficult to teach them to forget the traditional educational system. It's very difficult because when they go into school, they think of, my teacher is going to evaluate me. My teacher is going to say if I'm right or wrong. My teacher is going to say if I am correct or not. And this way of thinking, it's very difficult because you have to teach them autonomy and not submission, and they come from submissive systems. So this is very difficult. And concerning the background, many of our students, they had never had contact with the theater before. Sometimes they come with the idea of being a light operator or sound operator for TV or movies, but not for theater. So they learn about theater inside the school. They don't have previous knowledge. And so they learn theater by doing theater and then watching, and then they start watching. But at the same time, we have students who finished university, who had post-graduation abroad, for example. So it's very mixed, and this mix is so interesting because you put everybody together. There is no bubble, everybody is connected. And this is a way of also making a more global vision of Brazilian society when they come, I don't know if I answered, but I hope so.
Yes, super, thank you.
Okay.
So we are at just 5 to the end of the closing. So I'm going to basically do this. We're going to just quietly segue into the after party, which is basically what is. Thank you so much. Do come to next week's talk if you are free and available. It is Amy Russell has curated it from Embodied Poetics, and my fellow co-curator and co-conspirator in Unrehearsed Futures. And it's a talk with, my eyesight is killing me. Yeah, it's in conversation with Clark Baim from Birmingham Institute for Psychodrama and Pablo Gersheng, actor, director, and pedagogue. And they're looking at performance practices in terms of psychotherapeutic healing and their respective approaches, which is the drama spiral, intimate models, and myth making. And it looks very exciting, and I will be there. And it is at 1:30 India time, so that would be 2 hours before this talk started today on Thursday. And there you go. Falguni's also put it in the chat window, and you can look at all the conversations on the website where you have said where we see it. Rodolfo, on behalf of all of us, thank you. This is where I stop the formal recording. I see we've got a lot of regulars here. If there's anything you want to say.